Moses looked down at the Egyptian. He was not moving. The sand around him was dark. Moses had not planned this. That was the part that stayed with him. He had not planned any of it. He had seen the whip come down, had seen the Hebrew man's back open, had heard the sound. Something came up through his chest before he decided. Then his hands were on the Egyptian's throat. Then they weren't. He looked around. The field was long and flat, dry grass, a wall in the distance, one road, nobody. Moses looked down again. The Egyptian's eyes were open. His chest was not moving. Moses crouched, put a hand near the man's mouth. Nothing. He stood, looked at his hands. They were steady. That was the wrong thing. He had just killed a man and his hands were steady, and he did not know what that meant. He looked around again. The field was empty. He grabbed the man's ankles, dragged him to the soft ground at the edge of the road, dug with his hands, then with a stone, then with his hands again. The sand went in under his nails. He pushed the Egyptian into the ground, pushed the sand back over him, smoothed it with his palms, stood. The mound was too obvious. He moved sand from the road, flattened it, pressed it down with his foot, looked at it, looked at the road, looked at the field. Nobody. He walked back toward the city. His sandals left prints. He stopped, turned around, looked at the prints, walked back and dragged his foot through them, then kept walking. The sun was low. He had time before the gates changed. He passed 2 soldiers without looking up, passed a woman carrying water, passed 3 boys running toward the river. Nobody looked at him twice. He walked through the palace gate, nodded at the guard. The guard nodded back. Same as always. His servant met him at the corridor, brought water, brought a cloth. Moses held out his hands. The servant poured. The water ran brown into the basin. The servant did not look up, did not say anything, just poured. Moses watched the water change color, then looked away. "You're quiet tonight," the servant said. "I'm tired." The servant set down the basin. "There's food prepared." "I'm not hungry." The servant looked at him once, then looked down. "I'll leave it in case." Moses went to the window. Below, the palace courtyard was lit, torches along the walls, guards at the corners, laughter coming from somewhere inside, a dinner happening, Egyptian voices rising and falling, someone telling a story, someone else laughing at the end of it. Moses pressed his fingers against the stone ledge. Under a field outside the city, a man was in the ground. Up here, someone was laughing. He could not make those 2 things exist in the same world, but they did. He stayed at the window until the courtyard went quiet, then lay down on the bed, did not sleep. In the deep part of the night, he heard the footsteps in the corridor. He was on his feet before he decided to stand. The footsteps passed. A servant, just a servant. Moses stood in the middle of the room, listening until the sound disappeared, then sat back down on the edge of the bed. His chest was still moving fast. He pressed his hands flat against his knees. He had grown up in this palace. He knew every sound it made, the way the stone cooled at night and ticked in the walls, the way the guard's sandals scraped differently than servants' sandals. He had never listened to those sounds like this, like they were evidence of something, like every footstep was coming for him specifically. He lay back down, stared at the ceiling. He thought about the Egyptian, not the man's face, the sound, the way the man's body had gone from resistance to nothing. How fast that happened, how final. Moses had been trained by Egyptian priests. He had read about death. He had seen death at a distance, at ceremonies, in the market, once at the river. He had never felt it transfer through his own hands before. He had not known it felt like that. He turned onto his side, closed his eyes, saw the dark sand, opened them again. Morning came without him sleeping. He dressed, went to the hall, sat at the table. Food was placed in front of him. He ate enough that no one would ask questions. Across the table, two of Pharaoh's officials were talking. Moses kept his face toward his food, caught one word, overseer. He went still. Hasn't reported since yesterday. Moses reached for his cup. His hand moved normally. He made it move normally. Probably drunk somewhere. The other man laughed. Moses drank, set the cup down, did not look up. The conversation moved on. Moses sat there until it was reasonable to leave, then stood, walked out of the hall at the pace of a man who had somewhere to be. Not fast, not slow, the pace of a man who was fine. He went back out that afternoon. He told himself he was going to check. He walked the same road, kept his face forward. He passed the field, did not look at the mound, kept walking. Ahead, two men were arguing in the road, both Hebrew. Moses moved toward them. Why are you striking your brother? The man who was holding the collar looked up. His eyes were sharp, not afraid, not even surprised. He let go. Who made you a ruler over us? Moses stayed still. Are you going to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian? The road was empty. Moses' chest went cold. He looked at the man. The man looked back, waiting. Moses said nothing. He turned around, walked back the way he came. His feet moved, but the road didn't feel like it was under him. Someone had seen. One person was enough. In a country like this, one person was always enough. He stood in the street outside the palace wall. Carts passed him, children passed him, a man with a donkey passed him. Moses stood there. He thought about a morning when he was young, 7 years old, maybe 8. Pharaoh's daughter had found him crying in the garden. He did not remember why. She had crouched down in front of him, put her hand against his face. "You are mine," she said. Like that settled everything. Like that was enough. He had believed her. For years after, whenever something did not fit, whenever a servant hesitated too long before obeying, or a soldier looked at him a half second too long, or an official's voice changed slightly when he walked into the room, he had pressed that memory down over it like a cloth. You are mine. He had eaten at their table, worn their linen, learned their gods' names, walked in and out of this palace like he had always belonged to it. And he had also known, somewhere underneath all of that, that there was a field outside the city where Hebrew men broke their backs under Egyptian whips, and that he had come from those men, and that he had never done anything about it until yesterday. And now, the thing he had done, the only true thing he had done in either direction, had made him belong to neither world. He was not Egyptian. He had just killed one. He was not Hebrew. He had just proven they could not trust what he might do. He did not know what he was. He stood in the street until a cart driver shouted at him to move. He moved. He went back to the palace, sat in his room. The city noise came through the window. He thought about how long before they found the body. The sand was soft where he had buried it. Wind could shift it. Rain, though there was rarely rain, could expose it. An animal could find it. A child could find it. One person looking in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Then soldiers at the palace gate. Then Pharaoh. He thought about standing in front of Pharaoh and trying to explain. He could not finish the thought. In the corridor outside, footsteps again. He was on his feet again before he knew it. He stood in the middle of the room, listening. The footsteps stopped outside his door. His throat closed. A knock. "Your presence is requested at dinner, my lord." Moses breathed. "Tell them I'm unwell." A pause. "Yes, my lord." The footsteps moved away. Moses sat back down. He could not keep doing this. Every sound, every knock, every official mentioning an overseer, who hadn't reported. He was not going to survive this palace, not because they were going to catch him, maybe they would, and maybe they wouldn't, but because he could not go back to being the man who sat at their table like none of this was happening. That man was already gone. He left before dawn. He did not go back to the palace. He did not say goodbye. He took water. He took bread. He took a knife. He walked out through a servant's gate while the guards were changing. The desert was cold before sunrise. He had not known it would be this cold. He had seen the desert from palace windows his whole life, a line of beige at the edge of the city, a thing that existed out there. He had not thought about what it felt like to be inside it. Now he understood. No walls, no torchlight, no stone under his feet, just sand and dark and the sound of nothing. He kept walking east. The sun came up behind him and the desert turned gold and then white, and then the heat hit like something physical. He stopped once, drank water, looked back. Egypt was a shape on the horizon. The palace towers were still visible. He turned back east and kept walking. By midday, the shape was gone. He stopped when his legs gave him a reason to, sat against a rock. The silence was a different kind of thing out here. In the palace, there was always sound underneath the quiet. Servants moving, water in pipes, animals in the courtyard, the low hum of people living around you. Out here, there was nothing underneath anything, just the sound of his own breathing, just the sound of his own heart. He had never been alone like this, not once in his life. There had always been a room, a servant on the other side of a door, a guard at the end of a corridor, someone who knew where he was. Out here, nobody knew where he was. Nobody was looking. Nobody was coming. He had ceased to exist to everyone who had ever known his name. That thought should have broken something in him. It didn't. That was the part he could not understand. He pressed his back against the rock and looked out at the desert and felt nothing collapse. Just the heat, just the silence, just the question of who he was going to be now that there was no one left to tell him. Moses pressed his back against the rock. He was a prince of Egypt. He was a Hebrew slave's child. He was a man who had killed someone in a field and buried him under the sand. He did not know which of those things was real. He did not know which one was going to follow him into whatever came next. He looked at his hands. These were the hands that had been washed by servants, that had held Egyptian texts, that had eaten at Pharaoh's table, that had gone into a man's throat in a field and come out the other side as something else entirely. He folded them together, pressed them against his knees. He sat there until the rock shadow moved away from him and the sun hit full. Then he stood. Because sitting was not going to change anything. He was in the desert. He had left the only life he knew. He had no plan, no destination, no one coming, no one who even knew where he was. He pulled his robe up against the heat and walked east, into the silence, into the nothing, with no idea what he was walking toward, only knowing what he could not walk back to, his hands at his sides, still steady, still wrong,